No one knows exactly when it began.
The masters of biting and vulgar satire collapsed and disappeared from the market 3 times.
It's impossible to count how many times they were taken to court.
The editorial office was the target of terrorist attacks twice.
The one on January 7th, 2015, which killed 12 people, brought the world together in support.
Welcome to the Media History Podcast.
Thank you for listening and thank you for reading. My name is Małgorzata Dwornik.
And I am Bartłomiej Dwornik.
We are from the Reporterzy.info online magazine.
We will tell you the story about Charlie Hebdo,
The turbulent history of cartoon provocateurs from France. Older and middle generations around the world who enjoy books, even if unfamiliar, have likely heard of the comic strip Peanuts. Its main character is a sweet boy named Charlie Brown, and it's his name that became part of the title of the globally known satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo. Hebdo, on the other hand, is an abbreviation of the adjective hebdomadaire, meaning weekly. The origins of this now respectable publication were very turbulent and date back to 1960. It also had a different name back then. In September 1960, 3 friends, satirist Georges Bernier, known as Professeur Charon, writer François Cavana, and cartoonist Frédéric Orhon Theodore Aristides, who used the pseudonym Fred, founded a monthly magazine called Harakiri. The 3 had known each other since the 1950s, when they worked together at the magazine Zero, renamed in 1958 to Cordies. After a failed attempt to take over the original monthly, they were forced to leave, which led to the birth of a new publication. In the first issue, along with Cavana, satirists like Jean Brassier, Jean Pellissier, De Carlo, and Charles Legros contributed texts. Beside Fred's drawings, appeared humor from Loeb, Jacques Loeb, Peloche, Pierre Perraudin, and Vic, Antoine Raymond. The print run of the first 2 issues was 10,000 copies in small format, priced at 1.90 francs and sold directly on the street. But the third issue already hit newsstands, had a larger format A4, and featured a gallery of famous names including Jean Maurice, Jules Cabou, known as Cabou, creators of French comics. The cover of the first issue of Harakiri was designed by Fred. It featured a samurai who had just committed harakiri, and from his split-open belly protruded a smiling face. The caption read, Honi soit qui ça fait mal, sincerity that hurts.
Stupid and wicked newspaper.
Harakiri's fame grew, and the editorial office became a hub for young satirists hoping to be published. But the sharp language and exquisite line work didn't sit well with some readers. One day, a letter arrived at the office with criticism.
You are idiots, and not just stupid, but evil.
Bernier immediately turned this into a motto that lasted many years. On April 7, 1961, the issue bore the tagline, Journal bête et méchant, stupid and wicked newspaper. Although popular on the street, the monthly was a thorn in the side of the authorities who banned it twice, in 1961 and 1966, which led to financial troubles. In 1967, bankruptcy was declared. Bernier and Cavana founded a new company, Editions du Scare, and moved the editorial office from Rue Choron to Rue de Montauban. Harakiri quickly recovered. During this time, Delphail Deton, a well-known journalist, joined the team, and in February 1969, the word Hebdo was added to the title, transforming the monthly into a weekly. November 1970 brought more trouble, a block, and a name change. On November 1st, a tragedy occurred at the Paris nightclub 5 to 7. Flames took the lives of 146 people. 9 days later, on November 9th, General Charles de Gaulle died. And on November 16th, Harakiri ran the headline, Bal tragique à Colombey, 1 mort, tragic ball in Colombey, 1 dead. These were essentially 2 headlines separated by a dash, meant to be a parody of how the press covered the nightclub fire 10 days before the general's death. But it came off poorly and caused uproar in France. The general was insulted and his death mocked.
Sales ban for pornography.
The outrage was so great that the matter reached the highest state offices, and the paper was censored and banned from sale. The official reason for spreading pornography, referring to a drawing of 4 little penises by Willem and Cabot from earlier issues. A scandal broke out. Journalists stood in defense of their colleagues. The newsroom was in turmoil. How to save the weekly? Other papers stepped in. Le Monde and Le Nouvel Observateur gave up their covers and several pages for support. A week after the bans and intense brainstorming, Bernier and Kavanagh found a lifeline. On November 23rd, a new weekly Charlie Hebdo launched, in the old style. The editorial article by François Kavanagh declared, "Il n'y a pas de censure France." There's no censorship in France. And a man in dark glasses with a cane said, "Liberté de la presse? Vaut mieux entendre ça que d'être sourd. Freedom of the press? Better to hear that than be deaf." At the top of the front page, the names and pseudonyms of the authors were listed. Cabot, Kavanagh, Professeur Choron, Georges Bernier, Delphin de Ton, journalist Henri Roussel, Fournier, journaliste Pierre Fournier, GB, graphic designer Georges Blondeau, Reiser, cartoonist Jean-Marc Reuser, Willem, Dutch cartoonist Bernhard Willem Holtrop, and Wolinski, graphic artist of Polish origin Jerzy Wolinski. In short, the entire Harakiri team. Though the declaration stated Charlie Hebdo in no way replaces La Hebdo Harakiri, aside from small graphic changes in article order, everyone knew this was a continuation.
New leader of the satirical scene in France.
The name of the weekly was not only the name of the boy from Peanuts, but also a nod to General Charles de Gaulle. As everyone knows, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest, and that was the case here. Readers snatched the paper from one another, and its circulation quickly soared. While Harakiri sold 40,000 copies weekly, Charlie Hebdo reached 100,000. Just like before, François Kavanagh served as editor-in-chief, and Georges Bernier directed the entire publishing house. Given the circumstances, the ban on printing Harakiri was lifted, leaving only the restriction on sales to minors. Although the weekly appeared sporadically until October 1989, Charlie Hebdo became the undeniable leader of the French satirical media scene. Throughout the 1970s, Charlie Hebdo entertained and shocked. Its covers were known across France. Politics was the main subject, but the paper touched on many other issues too. It was even ahead of its time in some areas, such as political ecology, a concept pioneered by Pierre Fournier. The main topics of that era included social consumerism, counterculture, anti-racism, anti-militarism, sex, religion, and feminism. Georges Bernier and François Kavanagh were the backbone of the editorial team. Bernier, while often publishing his own articles in the weekly, oversaw the entire company, which included about 7 other titles, advertising, distribution, and finances. He loved to provoke. He insulted more than a few dignitaries and politicians and didn't care at all. He stood trial several times for insulting the police and the military. He eagerly supported younger colleagues in their projects and didn't consider them editorial property. Kavanagh was a writer and had a different take on satire. He wrote columns, essays, and reports. He translated books. Sometimes he dabbled in drawing. The two men understood and complemented each other well. Sadly, not forever. Alongside the founding duo, the key figures in the editorial staff were illustrators Wolinski and Cabot. Both were present at the birth of Harakiri and Charlie Hebdo. They felt most at home in caricature. They also created characters that became part of the history of French satire. Wolinski gave life to Le Roi des Cons, King of Fools, and Cabot to Le Grand Duduche, the Grand Prince. They appeared on TV shows like Droit de Réponse, Right of Reply, where they illustrated events in the studio. They had their own columns, held exhibitions, and taught younger artists. Both were killed in the 2015 editorial attack. Charlie Hebdo was known for its names. If a rookie had potential and only such talent made it through, the whole of France would soon know them. This was the case with Sylvie Castor, who joined the team in 1976 as a columnist. Today she has authored numerous articles, columns, and books. One notable figure of the era was Dutch graphic artist and journalist Bernhard Willem Holtrop, signing as Willem. Holtrop had already clashed with authorities in his home country due to his caricatures. In 1966, in the magazine Provo, he published drawings of Queen Juliana as a prostitute in a window and of a swastika-shaped policeman chasing a small man. He was taken to court. He was fined for insulting the monarchy and public authority. He didn't pay, appealed, and was acquitted, but left the Netherlands in protest and moved to Paris, where he began working for Charlie Hebdo. He authored many comics and, as a result, created a variety of characters, like Detective Gust van Dalen and the black-bearded terrorist Barnstein. His cartoons were filled with sex, violence, and drugs. Not being fluent in French grammar, he made many errors, which amused the editorial team. Bernier decided to keep them and didn't allow the Dutchman's texts to be corrected. Over time, this weird language became Willem's signature, and readers loved it.
The line crossed. Collapse and revival.
Charlie Hebdo didn't run ads. All its income came from subscriptions and newsstand sales. As it turned out, Bernier overspent on personal pleasures. Also, more and more pornography and vulgarities appeared in the weekly, which didn't sit well with Kavanagh or the readers. The early 1980s brought conflict not just between the two founders, but across the entire editorial team. In his book, Honeymoon, Kavanagh wrote about those days.
Obscene? Why not if we stay in the parody of shit, but not in shit itself?
Debts and disputes led to the paper's downfall. The last issue appeared on December 23, 1981, as number 580. In January 1982, Bernier declared bankruptcy. Charlie Hebdo vanished from the French media scene. For the next 10 years, each former member worked at similar publications or independently. Until 1992, when Jebe and Kabou, who were then working for the satirical weekly La Grosse Bertha, left in solidarity with the editor-in-chief, singer and comedian Philippe Val. The men decided to launch their own paper. They invited their old colleagues Kavanagh, Delfeildeton, and Wolinski. Bernier declined, remembering past conflicts and disagreements, but Dutchman Willem rejoined his editorial colleagues. They didn't spend much time on the name of the new paper. They were unanimous. Charlie Hebdo. The first issue, released on July 1, 1992, had a print run of 100,000 copies. Kavanagh became company director, Val editor-in-chief, and J. Bay editorial and artistic director. The editorial team set a goal:
To preserve the spirit of Charlie, which means the ability to laugh at everything, with recurring targets like the military, religious fundamentalists, or the far right. The paper aims to maintain a polemical tone without losing sight of ideals of social justice.
Critics claimed that all that remained of the original Charlie was the name, and that the new version didn't measure up. But readers disagreed. Circulation quickly rose to 140,000 copies.
In the crosshairs, politicians, religions, even entire cities.
The main theme of the 1990s in the weekly was the far-right National Front Party and the entire political right. Furious politicians filed lawsuits one after another, and the editors became regular guests in the dock, which they mocked in their pages as they continued doing what they did. In 1995, journalists gathered over 173,000 signatures on a petition to outlaw the National Front, which they claimed violated several points of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The weekly achieved nothing legally, but for years afterward, politicians from that party remained a favorite target of aggressive cartoons and columns. Religion was always not taboo in the world of satire. While Catholicism was the main target in earlier years, in the new era, attention turned to Islam, which, as we know, tolerates no jokes about itself. Charlie Hebdo spared no one. Police, government, the Pope, or a foreign president were always fair game for the weekly's journalists and cartoonists. Even entire cities were attacked, like Toulon in 1995, after the National Front won local elections there. In 1993, popular topics included Bill Clinton, John Paul II, and Helmut Kohl, and in 1995, the new French president Jacques Chirac. Even Lady Diana in 1997, and wars like the Kosovo conflict in 1999 weren't off limits. But religion and politics weren't the only dominant topics in the editorial office or on the pages of the weekly. Sex, in all forms and configurations, violence and money were everywhere. When it came to money, Oncle Bernard Maris, had the most to say. He wrote the economics column under that name. Maris was an economist, university lecturer, and journalist. Before joining Charlie Hebdo, he wrote for various papers including Le Monde and Le Figaro magazine. He gave commentaries on French radio and TV. He openly criticized capitalism and the market economy. He was a politically engaged leftist thinker. He died in the 2015 attack. A rising star of the time was Renaud Louzier-Luce. He joined the team in March 1995. 2 years later, he made waves with his comic strip Les Maigret gèrent la ville. The Maigret managed the city, in which he mocked the newly elected mayor of Vitrolles, Catherine Maigret, and her husband. The case went to court, where Luce was acquitted.
Editorial war and the Mohammed cartoons.
While everything looked fine on the outside and circulation was rising, the editorial team was in conflict. Constant arguments and tension, caused by the editor-in-chief himself, made collaboration difficult. The nearly 40-person staff split into two political factions, and Val pushed his methods so hard that those who opposed him were fired. One of the first was Mona Chollet, a Swiss writer and journalist. In 2000, she protested Val's description of Palestinians as uncivilized and was fired. 5 others shared her fate. The editorial war lasted until 2009, ending with the revolution and Val's departure. But before that, Charlie Hebdo endured several painful blows. After the September 11th attacks, the world turned its attention to Islam and its followers. The Paris Weekly did the same, perhaps more drastically, expressing its views through drawings, columns, and caricatures that were pointed and one-sided. No to Islam, no to terror. In November 2002, the Weekly published a text by Robert Mizrahi supporting the views of Italian journalist and author Oriana Fallaci, and praising her book, The Rage and the Pride, in which she spoke out against Islam. The article sparked criticism and divided public opinion. Mizrahi was condemned for the way he expressed his views. Islam and its leaders stayed on the Weekly's pages, but weren't the only topic. France held elections, Benedict XVI became the new pope, and Gebe passed away. In November 2005, riots broke out in Paris and lasted 18 days after 2 teens died from electric shock. The journalists took notice. On February 8, 2006, Charlie Hebdo sparked outrage among French and not only Muslims by printing, after Denmark's Jyllands-Posten and France's own François, a series of 12 Muhammad cartoons. The drawings were accompanied by a cover from Kabul, showing Muhammad clutching his head and saying, "It's hard being loved by idiots." The issue sold 400,000 copies, with reprints, and the Islamic pot boiled over. Islamic organizations sued the Weekly, which was acquitted a year later. In March, Charlie Hebdo published the Manifesto of the 12, Together Against the New Totalitarianism, where 12 prominent figures, including Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Taslima Nasrin, and Salman Rushdie, spoke out against religious fascism. In October 2007, the Weekly opposed the Zénith de Paris Amendment, introducing DNA tests for family reunification. Future First Lady Carla Bruni supported them. In February 2008, the weekly's journalists held a meeting at École Normale Supérieure in Paris to support Ayaan Hirsi Ali and her fight for women's rights around the world.
The Siné affair.
Every major and minor event found its place in Charlie Hebdo. Meanwhile, the editorial conflict raged on. Val's opponents accused him of being authoritarian, increasingly rare humor in his articles, making a deal with the paper Liberation to run ads in Charlie Hebdo, which had never published ads before, imposing his pro-Israeli views and mismanaging finances. The final straw was the Siné affair in July 2008. Siné, or Maurice Siné, a cartoonist and satirist, began working at Charlie Hebdo in 1981, creating the column Siné sème sa zone, Siné makes trouble. After the paper's relaunch in 1992, he resumed the column. He was taken to court several times for alleged anti-Semitism and inciting racial hatred. On July 2, 2008, Siné published a column criticizing John Sarkozy, the son of the newly elected president, especially for converting to Judaism. The article stirred controversy, mainly in political circles, and the weekly was labeled anti-Semitic. A lawsuit followed, and Val fired Siné. This sparked an even bigger uproar in French journalism. Rumors swirled about revenge, grudges, and conflicts between the editor and the cartoonist. Regardless, on July 18th, the longtime artist left the paper, and 2 years later, he was cleared of all charges. On May 12, 2009, after 17 years, Philippe Val also left the editorial team. He was replaced by journalist Gérard Biard. That wasn't the only personnel change. Charb, Stéphane Charbonnier, became the new publishing director. Cartoonist Riss, Laurent Sourisseau, took over as editorial director with Sylvie Coma as his assistant, and Bernard Maris became managing editor. In August, the weekly launched its own publishing house, Les Échappés, run by Riss.
Charlie Hebdo 3.
When emotions settled and the atmosphere calmed down in September 2009, a third version was announced, Charlie Hebdo 3, along with the release of the 900th anniversary issue and the official launch of the website. Although it had been live since September 10, 2008, it was still under construction. Charlie Hebdo was born for the third time. In the first issue of its third life, the editorial article made the declaration, "It will reconnect with what unites everyone in the newsroom, a passion for satire." This time, in a calmer environment, journalists and cartoonists carried on their crusade against religion and politics, putting at the forefront the principle of laïcité, the absolute separation of church and state.
We are a paper against religions whenever they enter the political and public sphere. You should not identify through religion, at least not in a secular state.
Charlie Hebdo kept moving forward, despite threats and questions from supporters like, "Is it worth adding fuel to the fire?" But freedom of speech mattered more than threats. The first November 2011 issue was promoted as Sharia Hebdo, with Muhammad as guest editor-in-chief.
First attack on the newsroom.
On the cover of that issue, the Prophet says, 100 lashes if you don't die of laughter. And inside, there was an article by him titled Aperitif Halal, and a women's insert, Madame Sharia. The issue was scheduled for release on Wednesday, November 2nd, but during the night between November 1st and 2, the editorial office at 62 Boulevard Davout was firebombed, and the website was hacked. The fire destroyed the office space, but no one died, and the issue still came out. The following week's cover featured two passionately kissing men, a Muslim and a cartoonist, under the caption, L'amour plus fort que la haine. Love is stronger than hate. After the attack, the team was hosted for nearly 2 months by colleagues from Libération. At the beginning of 2012, Charlie Hebdo moved into an office at 26 Rue Serpollet. A year later, on September 19, 2012, the weekly published another series of Muhammad cartoons, triggered by the screening of the Islamophobic film Innocence of Muslims. This time, in addition to religious groups, some politicians also expressed disapproval. The French government, just in case, closed embassies in Muslim countries. Lawsuits followed, and Charb ended up on a wanted, dead or alive list, published by Al-Qaeda's English-language magazine in 2013.
Reader's fundraiser to save Charlie.
After Philippe Val left the editorial team and sold his shares for a symbolic sum, Charlie Hebdo began facing financial troubles. The weekly didn't run ads, and its circulation was dropping, as was the case with most newspapers. Although 40,000 copies were printed weekly, only 30,000 were sold. To break even, 35,000 needed to be sold. Debt was piling up. Occasionally, when major events occurred, circulation spiked, but it was an unpredictable roller coaster. In November 2014, Charb asked the public for help. Donations amounted to 200,000 euros, which helped save the weekly. Charlie Hebdo remains a thorn in the side, not only of the Muslim world, but also the Catholic and political spheres. Compared to its rivals, it is both more crude and more ruthless, combining caricatures with often fierce polemical humor. Thanks to its sharp cartoons and cutting, aggressive texts, it became a permanent fixture of the French street, visible at newsstands, bookstores, and stations. Frequent topics in the second decade of the 21st century included church sex scandals in 2010, with Pope Benedict XVI often featured on covers, holding a condom over his head or kissing a Vatican guard. In 2013, the headlines focused on the government crisis, same-sex marriage, and the war in Syria. A year later, the spotlight was on the new Prime Minister Manuel Valls and marijuana legalization.
January 7th, year 2015, 12 fatalities.
But the topic of Islam and Muhammad returned from time to time. On January 7th, 2015, Issue featured a caricature of Michel Houellebecq, author of the controversial novel Submission, which launched that same day. The cover was drawn by Luce, while inside, Charb featured a cartoon titled Still No Attack in France. At the same time, a cartoon by Honoré appeared on Facebook and Twitter showing Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leader of the Islamic State, wishing the French a happy new year, and above all, good health. No one at Charlie Hebdo imagined they had just poked the bear. As usual, on Wednesday, January 7, 2015, at 10:30 a.m., the editorial meeting began at the office at 10 Rue Nicolas Appert, the paper's headquarters since July 1, 2014. An hour later, at 11:25, two masked, armed men stormed the building, shooting two security guards and killing one of them. On their way inside, they encountered Corinne Ray, Coco, a designer and cartoonist whom they took hostage and forced to unlock the main newsroom doors. They burst in, demanded to see Charb. When he stepped forward, they shot him. Then, shouting, "You insulted the Prophet," they opened fire on the rest of the people in the conference room. As they exited, they kept shooting. At the main entrance, they ran into a police patrol, fired several shots, then jumped into a car and escaped. The attackers were brothers Sherif and Said Kouachi, members of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. The attack was carried out with the group's knowledge and approval. Within just minutes, 12 people were killed. 8 were key members of the editorial team: Jean-Maurice Jules Cabu, Stéphane Charbonnier, Charb, Bernard Verlac, Tignous, Philippe Honoré, Georges Wolinski, Bernard Maris, Oncle Bernard, Mustafa Ourad, copy editor, and Elsa Kayat, psychoanalyst and columnist. The remaining 4 were Frédéric Boisseau, security guard, the first victim; Michel Renaud, guest at the editorial meeting; Franck Brinzolaro, police officer, personal bodyguard to Charb; and Ahmed Merabet, police officer, peacekeeper, wounded and executed after trying to stop the killer's escape. There were also 11 injured. All of France was speechless. The world was stunned. January 8th was declared a national day of mourning. It turned out that the Charlie Hebdo attack wasn't the only terrorist operation planned for that day.
Je Suis Charlie.
On Sunday, January 11th, a protest march took place with the participation of 44 world leaders and 1.5 million people. Over the 2 days, many such marches were held, with an estimated total of around 4 million participants. People all over the world protested. In Paris, marchers carried signs reading, Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie, white letters on a black background. The same message appeared on the website, which was shut down right after the attack, but was soon restored. The slogan also spread on Twitter, accompanied by an image of a clenched fist holding a pencil. The drawing and slogan were used by media around the world in coverage of the Paris tragedy. Within 2 days, it became one of the most popular hashtags, 6,500 per minute. And on January 14th, it appeared on the cover of issue number 1178, called The Survivor. A weeping Muhammad holds the sign, and above his head reads, Tout est pardonné. All is forgiven. The cover was drawn by Luce, who avoided the attack. He was not at the office, just like editor-in-chief Gérard Biard, who was in London at the time. The Survivor issue, with all reprints, reached 5 million copies. All profits beyond the regular amount went to compensation for the families of the victims. The next issue was published only on February 25th. As always in difficult times, colleagues from Libération stepped in and supported the wounded editorial team. They advertised the return of the weekly, its topics, and introduced new cartoonists Ali Dilem and René Petillon. Perhaps the terrorists, who were shot 2 days after the attack, were forgiven, but certainly not forgotten. Despite fear, topics about Islam continued to appear on Charlie Hebdo's covers, and Bayard said,
Charlie is alive and will not give up.
However, the figure of Muhammad disappeared. The trauma had its effect, along with media pressure, police oversight, and the absence of fallen colleagues in the newsroom. For some, it was too much. In May 2015, Renaud Luz announced his departure. He no longer wanted to draw cartoons of Muhammad. The murdered journalists were posthumously awarded France's highest honors, Legion of Honor. Their names etched on many commemorative plaques, and streets were named after them. 2 gargoyles on the tower in La Rochelle guarding the entrance to the old port bear the faces of Wolinski and Kabou. France remembers, so do their colleagues. 1 year after the tragedy, on January 6, 2016, a special edition of Charlie Hebdo was published. Issue had 32 pages, a print run of 1 million copies, and included caricatures and works by the murdered staff.
We give ourselves the right to criticize.
For a while after the attack, the paper's circulation hovered around 1 million, but interest gradually declined, and the journalists themselves didn't want to be seen as martyrs or heroes. While Islam remained a topic, it was addressed less frequently, partly because there were internal editorial disagreements on the matter. The 21st century world delivers so many events worth commenting on that Charlie Hebdo quickly returned to its usual path. In September 2015, it caused outrage with cartoons of Aylan Kurdi, the boy who drowned when a boat carrying Syrian refugees capsized off Turkey. In November, a convenient topic was Russia and the crash of the A321 aircraft over the Sinai Peninsula. A year later, on December 28th, cartoons depicted the crash of a Russian Defense Ministry plane near Sochi that killed 92 people, and the murder of Russian ambassador Andrei Karlov in Turkey. As expected, Kremlin was not amused by these jokes. On March 30th, 2016, Riss stirred another storm with his editorial on the Brussels attack. When he described the Belgian response as cowardice, fear of disputes, accusations of Islamophobia or racism leading to terror, Others accused him of a web of nonsense, reducing every practicing Muslim to a terrorist or criminal. He again caused a stir on October 29, 2019, by cover showing a caricature of President Macron surrounded by veiled women. A caption, referencing a speech he gave on Reunion Island, read, "Not my business." Later that year, in November, part of the team led by Corinne Ray, participated in the World Forum for Democracy in Strasbourg. The journalists answered every accusation, especially about recent cartoons. Their conclusion was clear.
We don't stop anyone from wearing what they want, but we reserve the right to criticize religion, just as we always have. We criticize Catholicism, we criticize Islam, we criticize Buddhists who persecute the Rohingya. We give ourselves the right to criticize religion, and that is normal.
Anniversary year full of scandals.
In 2017, the weekly celebrated its 25th anniversary, 1992, 2017. Some, like RIS, argued it should be counted from 1970, making it 43 years. Still, the anniversary year was packed with special publications. No one had reason to worry, even though circulation had dropped compared to the tragic year. 50,000 copies were available on newsstands and the same number sent to subscribers. A print run of 100,000 was a solid result. Scandals boosted those stats. That was the case in February and November of the anniversary year. The February issue, number 1281, depicted Angela Merkel holding the severed head of Martin Schulz. This referenced German elections, but also the cover of German magazine Der Spiegel, where Donald Trump holds the severed head of the Statue of Liberty. On November 1st, the cover featured Islamic scholar Tariq Ramadan, accused of rape at Oxford University. In a crude pose, smiling, he declared, "I am the sixth pillar of Islam." The editorial inbox received many criminal threats, including death threats. The matter was handed over to the police. A similar situation occurred on September 1st, 2020, when the paper, on the occasion of the trial of the January 2015 attackers, announced another series of Muhammad cartoons. The Muslim world began protesting and threatening. Instagram blocked the accounts of journalists Lordossi and Coco, who had posted the cartoons. In retaliation, on September 25th, a young Pakistani man claiming to defend the Prophet stabbed and seriously wounded two people near Charlie Hebdo's former offices. They were employees of a TV station that had taken over the space, something the attacker didn't know. He believed he was attacking Charlie Hebdo journalists. That same year, on October 28th, a cover showed Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in underwear with alcohol in hand, lifting the skirt of a woman in a hijab to admire her bare buttocks. The caption read, "Erdogan. Privately, he's very funny." The already tense situation between the countries escalated further, and Turkey threatened legal action.
Unofficial 50th anniversary.
It's hard to say how old the weekly is. Some count its age from 1992, others from 1970. Thus, in 2020, they celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first issue. For the anniversary, a book titled Charlie Hebdo, 50 Years of Freedom of Speech was published. Nearly 300 pages told the turbulent history of the weekly and its fight for freedom of expression, both in text and drawings. Those who had passed away were remembered. On July 9, 2021, a series of tribute articles and drawings by Stéphane Charbonnier Chab was launched. Though all those years had passed since his death, his humor continued to entertain, and his perspective on the world, which is now different, remained relevant. Just as in the past, Charlie Hebdo still speaks about global issues, the country, religion, and culture. The weekly is not only about cartoons and articles, it also features funny quizzes, special editions, books, and a newsletter. It's part of French life, both daily and on special occasions. Charlie Hebdo can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X. On the website charliehebdo.fr, readers can access all articles and drawings. Charlie Hebdo is still going strong. Its loyal base includes nearly 50,000 readers, combining print and digital, who support the journalists and cartoonists who create the weekly with passion and dedication. On the website, they describe their work as follows.
To be happy, Charlie Hebdo draws, writes, interviews, reflects, and plays with everything funny on earth, everything grotesque in life. Because life is so short, it would be a shame to spend it complaining about fate instead of laughing at it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Thank you for taking this journey together to a place where freedom of expression stands above fear.
If you enjoyed it, give our podcast a thumbs up
Visit our channel for more videos in a variety of formats.
and subscribe us so we can let you know when the next episode is out. Goodbye and see you soon.
Goodbye and see you soon.